All right, what is up, everybody? We've got Mags and Slabs, new episode coming at you. This is Brad from Sports Magazines and History. We got Mike. Say what's up, Mike.
What's up, everyone?
And we are also really excited to have a guest with us this evening. We have brought in our fellow expert to talk about our first topic tonight, which is going to be Time Magazine covers. And this is someone who I've communicated with for quite a while now, just, through my channel and, big time, long time collector. So we've got Rick Elsmore with us tonight. Rick, welcome. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate being invited to be on and really enjoying your podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, we're excited to have you. Why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit about yourself and what your background is as far as collecting?
Sure. Well, like most, I started collecting cards in the early 70s. My dad was also a card collector and a huge sports fan, so I came into it pretty easily. And then I even enjoyed getting subscriptions to Sports Illustrated, Inside Sports, Sport Magazine, even basketball and baseball digest during my high school years. And I ended up saving a lot of those. I kept them all in pretty good condition and, continued to grow that part of the hobby. I started a new Facebook group, Collectible Publications, about 6 months ago. We've already got over 300 people involved. But, really enjoying this aspect of the hobby. I still think it has a lot of room to grow, gaining new interest every day. And, look forward to being on here with you guys and talking about Time magazines.
Yeah, if you are listening and you're not in that collectible publications Facebook group, I highly encourage you to search it and join. A lot of really cool, slabs and magazines that you don't see too often get posted and get shared on that page. I think it's a fun page to be a part of.
Agreed.
And Rick, I want to ask you one more question. So I knew you had like a really big sports card background too, like a lot of us, but tell me, like, what was that moment, or how did you stumble upon the whole idea of graded magazines?
Well, I would say it was watching Jim Keough's videos on YouTube. That actually started it. I never even thought of it or heard of it. I had seen graded comic books, but did not know anything about it. And so I've been listening to his stuff for a little over 2 years now. And he's really, really helped me, educated me through the hobby. I actually bought a heat press and did a lot of the work myself. And now I've actually graded and slabbed over 400 magazines.
Wow, that's awesome. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into our topics. We got 4 different topics listed. And like I said, Rick's going to help us with this discussion on Time Magazine. So just kind of a little preface on Time Magazine. We don't have anything specifically that we're wanting to talk about in related to Time Magazine, but I think all 3 of us are in agreement that even though Sports Illustrated seems to be the most prominent, it's probably the most collectible right now. It definitely is the sports magazine that is getting slabbed the most often. There's some really cool opportunities with magazines and magazine covers and some of these other publications. And Time Magazine is, to me, a really interesting one. There, of course, are a handful of athletes who over the years have been on the cover of Time Magazine, but there's also a lot of just pop culture relevance. Time Magazine obviously has kind of been an institution of a publication for a long time. I think pretty much 100 years now, and a lot of history there, a lot of nostalgia, and like I said, a lot of pop culture and just interesting covers over the years that and we think some of those have some collectability. So anyway, we know that Rick, we know that you have collected a lot of Time magazines and you've gotten a lot slabbed. So let me just kind of pass it to you and talk to us a little bit. on your thoughts related to Time Magazine, the collectability, and maybe even like some specific covers that you own.
Sure. Well, I think when you look at the CGC census, the sports figures are certainly in much higher, being graded in a much higher number than the others. But I think there's still a lot of historical value with a lot of the other prominent covers that I think are relevant. You see a lot of U.S. presidents. There's a lot of historical moments in time, a number of influential people in history. I'll name a couple: Albert Einstein and Charles Lindbergh. And they also did a tremendous job covering World War II in the late 30s and early 40s. And I'm kind of a history buff as well as a sports buff. So the majority of the collection that I have in Time Magazine is from the World War II era. And I really enjoy a lot of those, seeing covers of the U.S. generals that fought in the war. The other thing that's kind of interesting with the Time magazines is there are a number of other versions that people just don't know about. There's a Canadian published version, and then there are some classroom editions that were published and sent around to elementary schools that kids could read in school. So they're actually very, very similar to the original magazine, but tweaked just a little bit for kids. And the big one that I am really into right now are the pony editions. And the pony editions were published from the early 40s to early to mid 40s. It's a much smaller version than the regular Time magazine, but it has the same text. It doesn't have the advertisements. And those were printed and handed out to the troops during the war so that they could keep up to date on the news and what was going on in the world. And those are very, very hard to find in good condition. The ones that I have seen for sale on eBay or on other auction sites have a tremendous amount of writing. They were almost always folded in half and are really beaten up. But there are some really classic issues there, the pony editions. And there are also 3 variations there. There was one that was printed in Hawaii, one that was printed in the US, and one that was printed in Europe. So I still think there's a lot of room for those to grow. And I'm really excited about them. And I really like them. It was a big part of my PC.
Do you have any of these pony edition ones?
I have a bunch of them.
Wow. I can only imagine like what they went through, the magazines themselves, in the just the craziness of, being in the middle of war.
Did you see the Red X
Yep.
5 issues that I just posted on my collectible publications page?
Yep.
I have the Hitler Red X in a pony edition in a CGC 8.5, and the second highest is a 5.0.
So CGC has recognized and has denoted the pony variants already?
Yes, they are variants. Yep.
So
because it actually says it on the front cover. It'll say printed in Hawaii or printed in the Mediterranean. So You'll see that depicted on the front cover as to where it was printed.
Yeah, you're really dropping some knowledge here, Rick. I knew nothing about the ponies or the the classroom versions that you're talking about. So tell me a little bit more, or clarify for me, what are the differences that you would spot on the cover when it comes to the regular, US version versus the pony versions?
Okay, it would be the exact same thing. And again, the pony versions did not have any of the advertisements, so they're very small. They're only about 5 by 8, so they're a much smaller version. They don't have the advertisements in them. They don't have a front and a back cover at all. And again, those were sent to the troops when they were stationed in Hawaii and in Europe during the war. And it was from 1942 to 45, I believe, just that period.
So they're meant to be compact, so they didn't get in the way.
Yes. And when you see them for sale, they're almost always folded in half. You could tell they probably put them in their back pocket.
Right.
Yeah.
So what about the classroom versions that you were talking about? What's the difference that you would notice there?
There is a bar under the title that will say wartime classroom editions. And those are again presented to the schools when the kids were learning about the war. So, but that's the exact same magazine. But those, very rarely do you see them.
Are those even more rare than the pony editions?
I think so. I don't see them very much at all. I've got 2 of them slabbed. And I probably got maybe 25 or 30 of the pony edition slabbed.
As if it wasn't hard enough just to get a nice, vintage Time magazine in good condition in general. These must be incredibly rare.
They are. And again, they don't have a vinyl cover either. They have just that natural paper cover, like the internal pages.
Oh, right.
So there's very, very little protection on those.
So there's not like an actual like cover, like with a like a figure or anything like that. Usually
there is a cover with a figure.
Okay.
And it looks just like the regular edition, but it's made out of just the paper that the pages are. You know how the regular magazine pages have that silky feel? These feel like just a regular sheet of paper, the entire ones.
It's in color?
What's that?
Is it in color or black and white?
All the text is black and white. The pages are black and white with some photos, but the cover is the red and white, just like the regular Time magazine.
Wow. And those couple that you've gotten slabbed, you were able to successfully get CGC to notate that as well, that it was a classroom version?
Yep. Wartime classroom version. Yep.
That's
cool. I think I have one with FDR when he was the president during the war. That was one, I think, probably my best one.
Really cool. So the one thing that I did know was I knew that because Time was such a large publication, that there were multiple variations, like from different countries. Like I see quite a bit, like a Latin America edition, or maybe like a European edition, or whatever some of the other ones are. But I definitely was not aware of any of those that you're and I feel like I see those a decent amount, or the Canadian version. Like I feel like those pop up somewhat regularly, but I had not been aware at all of these other variations you're talking about.
Yeah, if you do an eBay search, Time magazine pony edition, you'll see 60 or 70 of them in there.
Okay.
And it looks like a magazine. I mean, I'm sorry, a site, wartimepress.com, takes you right to a bunch of covers.
So, Rick, what do you think are you mentioned the Einstein, which is one for me that was on my radar. I had seen a raw one of that go up for auction several months back, and I was kind of bidding in on it, but I lost out on it. What would be some other Time magazine covers, whether sports or non-sports, that you think could potentially be some of the most collectible, or just really collectible issues?
Yeah, I would say a lot of the historical figures that were really famous, particularly I'm looking at the World War II era. You had Harry Truman, who became president after FDR. There are several covers with both of them on it. General Patton, a big name for his charge in Europe. Douglas MacArthur, another very famous general. And then I would say the one that became president, Eisenhower. So Eisenhower was a famous general, World War II, who became president later. Those are really big ones. There are some with Picasso, FDR's wife. Trying to think. So Charles Lindbergh,
Salvador Dali.
Yep, a lot of famous. A lot of the real popular ones are actually the Nazis. There's a number. Obviously not, people don't support the Nazi regime, but there's 5 or 6 covers with Hitler that typically sell for probably the highest prices of any of them.
Yeah, that's one that's always been somewhat of a inner conflict for me. Like, I see those and I see people get them slabbed, and I'm like, wow, there's obviously a ton of historical relevance there, but man, as a collector, it'd almost be tough for me to be like, oh yeah, I
gotta keep that one, isn't it?
Gotta get this Hitler in my collection,
You certainly wouldn't display it.
No.
The thing that's interesting is, like, as collectors and as people that are really into the just history in general, we start to like recognize, like, these were like influential figures, these were influential events. So that's where those things sometimes come out of the woodwork there.
Yeah, and I guess I'm kind of, that one wasn't that long ago. When you start to think about a lot of the history and the wars that were a long time ago and things, the Revolutionary War and the Civil War and a number of those. When you start to think about World War II, that wasn't that long ago, and
No.
some really scary facts that went on there that interesting but very scary. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, I just picked one up. I'm gonna grab off my floor real quick. I own very few Time magazines as of now. I've only gotten one slabbed. I should have grabbed it before tonight, but it'd probably take me a minute to dig through and find it. I got a 1990 Bart Simpson Time cover slabbed. That was a little bit of a personal thing just because my dad was a huge Simpsons fan. But I just picked up this Marilyn Monroe the other day because I felt like that was one that could potentially have some upside. It seems like for whatever reason, well, I mean, sex appeal or whatever. I mean, there's been plenty of beautiful women over the years, but Marilyn Monroe just seems like she's got tons of staying power as a pop culture icon. So I thought maybe this would have a little bit of upside.
I totally agree with that, Brad. Her cards, I have some of her cards slabbed, and those go for pretty good prices.
Yeah,
So
that was
there's a
something that we were chatting about earlier. How pop culture cards have really taken off over the past couple of years since COVID,
yeah.
and I can see that coming through in magazines too.
Yeah, I would be looking at a lot of the musicians too. I think like someone with a cover with Elvis Presley,
Yeah.
the Rolling Stones, the Beatles. Some of these.
My head, I definitely went there too when I first was introduced to this. Jim got me interested as well, just like like you guys. But it was actually the unboxing that Jim did with you, Rick, that got me interested in like, well, what's a little bit further back? What's a little bit older? Was Jackie? You had that Jackie Robinson 1951 Sport in that high grade, and it was gorgeous. So I was like thinking to myself, okay, what else we got here? What about Ty Cobb? What's a Ty Cobb's first cover?
Oh my
So
God.
you have to really dig. There's like baseball magazine covers and that sort of thing. Then you start thinking about like Babe Ruth and again baseball magazine maybe, but there's also other different types of publications. But it was definitely your video with Jim that got me starting to think about these vintage characters.
Yep. And I have the two sport ones that I have for Time magazine covers that are the Mickey Mantle and the Joe DiMaggio from 1936.
Yeah, I'm still looking for that Joe DiMaggio in a newsstand. It's not easy.
No, it isn't. No.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question was let's talk specifically about the athletes on Time magazine covers. The Mickey Mantle is a big one, and that came out, I believe, 53, right? So 3 years before his first Sports Illustrated cover.
Yep.
So I mean that's significant. What are some? And then you guys mentioned the DiMaggio. He was on two, I believe. His first one is in 36, and then he was on another one.
He was 41, maybe.
41. Okay, that would make sense. That was the year of his hit streak. But yeah, I know he was on one later. So what are some other athletes on Time magazine covers that you guys are aware of that you think are some collectible issues?
I've seen the Jackie Robinson, which would be a very popular one. Muhammad Ali.
Oh.
I've seen
And
one
that
with
one preceded the Ali preceded his Sports Illustrated cover too, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
Brad, if you want to go to let's see,
yeah, I've actually got it. I'm kind of
the
browsing
website.
right now. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Oh,
Then we can
nice.
look at some of these. That
This
first one there is George Sizzler in
is
1925.
and
Yeah.
these two, this one must be the it's not pictured here, but this must be that Jack Dempsey that I think Brad Seymour posted in the Facebook group the other day. Is that right? Did you guys see that he posted that he got the first, because CGC even noted it on the slab, first athlete ever on the cover of Time magazine, and I'm pretty sure it was Jack Dempsey, which
Yes, I did see that.
Okay, and if I'm correct about this, that's awesome because I mean Jack
Oh yeah,
Dempsey is still that's still a name and an athlete that I think carries weight. Legendary boxer. Whereas looking back at some of these Time magazine covers, I mean some of these guys are athletes that we don't necessarily know anymore. But for the first Time magazine cover to be Jack Dempsey, that's really cool. And yeah, he got one slabbed. That's something you never see. I think he might have might have been a pop 1 or maybe a pop 2. And yeah, they actually put there on the label first athlete on a Time magazine cover.
Oh wow, they did. That's amazing. Somebody also had that Rogers Hornsby, July 9th, 28.
Oh, love that one. Cardinals
That's
fan.
so cool.
I love that Rogers
Yeah.
Hornsby. Yeah, these are interesting. I mean, some of these, like I said, they may be athletes who don't necessarily have staying power now, 90 years later, but there are some pretty significant ones. There's the DiMaggio we were talking about from 36.
And we were talking about great alternative first covers. And I mean, that's right smack in his rookie year right there.
Yeah, that's an early DiMaggio.
Oh, yeah. Then Gehrig
that
right after.
That Lou Gehrig from 36 is nice. Is that split with that? Is that Carl Hubble?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then
honestly,
this is Bob Feller from 37.
I always wish that Lou Gehrig was a solo cover.
Yeah.
Nothing against Carl Hubble.
That would be nice. Let's see what else we got here.
The Joe Louis.
Yeah, the Joe Louis from 41.
Oh yeah, that's classic.
Let's see. Oh, Sugar Ray Robinson here from 51.
Wow. I didn't even know about that one.
I was going to say, I don't even know if I've ever seen that.
That's on my bucket list right there. That one is.
Yeah, I don't even know if I've ever seen that one, actually. Here's the mantle we were talking about. You definitely see that one quite a bit, and that's one of the most collectible.
What's interesting there is Willie Mays is the first photo one that I think we've come across.
Yes.
Well, at least since the 30s.
Beautiful Willie Mays.
That is a nice cover.
Precedes his first Sports Illustrated, and it's solo, whereas his first Sports Illustrated was with a couple other people.
Time did a lot of stuff with artwork. Their very first cover was a charcoal drawing that they paid $50 for, apparently, from some local artist. But over time, Time magazine started to enlist more and more prominent artists, apparently.
This is a good one, Arnold Palmer from 1960. I've always thought this Oscar Robertson drawing or painting or whatever is pretty cool from 61.
That is cool. It's nice to see a Oscar Robertson cover where he was like in his prime there.
Yeah, he's actually still in college. Well, I don't know. I think he played for the Royals professionally. They might have been based out of Cincinnati as well.
I think they might have been.
Yeah. So I don't know actually if that's the Cincinnati Bearcats or if that's the Cincinnati Royals. Jack Nicklaus. I feel like as time went on, there started to be less. I love this one, Juan Marichal, just because I've always been enamored with his wind-up.
Yep.
I love how it's got like every stage of his wind-up on the cover.
That's a good one to pair with his Sports Illustrated cover.
Yeah. Classic Jim Brown right here. So, I mean, definitely lots of cool opportunities with these Time magazine covers. And, we're only looking at these sports ones right here, but as we've already touched on, a lot of cool historical stuff too. And one thing I just want to mention is, Rick, you were talking about how you're a history buff and how there's so much history tied to a lot of these covers. And that's a big reason why I know both Mike and myself love collecting the Sports Illustrated, is just that history aspect and, capturing a moment in time. And, that is very much relevant with these Time magazine covers too.
Agree. Totally. Yeah. I'm a big vintage person in all collecting, particularly with cards and magazines.
Yeah. All right. Rick, anything else that you want to share? Actually, I have one little question for you. Am I correct in saying that many of the subscription issues for Time magazine actually had the label located on the back cover?
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
And it was typed on. It wasn't even a mailing label like there is on the sporting magazines where they're glued on. No, a lot of them are typed right there, but you will see some right on the front cover as well. I've seen both, and I have some with both, and it does have the glue on them, but the majority of them seem to be typed on, kind of a typeset right in the corner there by the spine.
It's kind of a blessing, so
Well, it looks a
to
lot better
differentiate.
from a visibility standpoint. I've
Certainly.
been big on eye appeal as far as anything on a lot of these magazines.
Yeah, I feel like as they got more like into maybe the 70s is when I start to see some more of the like sticker type labels on the front, similar to what we would see with Sports Illustrated.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really want to make listeners and collectors aware that if you are scouting for Time magazines to buy, and if you're looking specifically for newsstands, make sure you're checking that back cover, especially on the vintage issues, because like Rick just said, a lot of times those labels were actually on the back cover.
And CGC does not differentiate and spell those out like they do with Sports
You're
Illustrated.
absolutely right about that, Rick, and I think that's really
Yep.
disappointing.
I have a
That's
number of them slab that do have the label on the back, and it does not say subscription copy on the
right.
label.
Wow.
Yep, I've seen them for sale where people are trying to play coy, and then you kind of like ask, hey, what's the back looking like? Sometimes they don't even show the back. Like, oh yeah, there's a mailing address there.
Yep. I don't know what the breakdown is. It'd be interesting if we could ever find out. Like, I know a lot of folks have said 3 to 4% of the population of the Sports Illustrateds were actually newsstand. I kind of wonder what they would be with Time Magazine. I would think it'd even be less back from those early years.
Yeah, and it's really a shame they're not breaking it out. So the census
Yeah.
doesn't differentiate them at all, huh?
Nope.
This is
They
very
do. They do if the label has been removed from the front, though. I have a couple of Newsweeks that I took the label off, and you can see some residue there from the 1930s, and they did break off and say label removed.
The CGC graded magazines. It's a real sample, like snapshot, like a sample size of like historically how these things are really distributed, and it's unfortunate that kind of dropped a ball in that one area.
Yeah.
This is just kind of anecdotal, Rick. It's not any legitimate data because, like you said, it would seem logical that the newsstand count might be even lower for Time just because it was such a massive publication. But my just once again anecdotal experience is when I'm looking for Time magazine covers, it seems to me like the ratio of newsstand to subscription issues that I see for sale is much higher. I feel like I find much more newsstand copies of these Time magazines as compared to the newsstand copies of the vintage Sports Illustrateds.
Interesting. Yeah. Are you looking at newer ones or vintage or just in all of them, Brad?
I'd say probably 60s on. I haven't delved too far into the real early ones, but that would be my experience in looking at issues from the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
I was trying to find a Joe Louis first cover, and I didn't have too much problem finding a newsstand version. But I wonder if it's truly the percentage is higher, or if just the collecting community hasn't gone that direction as much as they have with Sports Illustrated and trying to weed out all the newsstands.
That's a good point too, because we do know there's a handful of collectors that have been in this hobby for several years, much longer than the majority of us have, and that they have a lot of monopoly on certain newsstands. It seems like they've got tons of copies that they went out and got. So that's very much a possibility too, Mike, as maybe the newsstands for the SIs have just been cleaned out more than the Times.
So maybe now is a good time for the Time Magazine newsstand gold rush.
There you go. Prospective Time magazine buyers go out and start hunting now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Although I have to say, some of those aren't cheap. I was looking for Salvador Dali, and the cheapest one I found was like $350 or $400 range.
Wow.
Huh. Yeah, I think I splurged a little bit and spent 150 on the Marilyn Monroe that I just picked up.
Yeah.
So, okay. Rick, you got anything else you want to share as far as Time magazine goes?
No, I think they're a little undervalued and underappreciated right now. I think it's we kind of say it's the bottom of the second with the graded magazine. I think it's bottom of the first with Time magazines. I think it's just at the beginning stages, and
Or in the batter's box.
yeah, or still in the batter's box. Maybe he hasn't even taken a swung yet. But no, I think there's some room, and I get a lot of comments on the stuff that I post, and I think folks are, hunting in their closets, attics, basements, and things like that, and it's going to be harder and harder to have those finds that we've been grabbing over the past couple of years.
I do truly believe that they're a piece of history in and of themselves.
Agree.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that when it comes to collectability of a certain publication, I think the reputability of that publication is pretty key. I think that's a major reason why Sports Illustrated has kind of set itself apart as the go-to when it comes to magazines. But I mean, Time Magazine, obviously iconic brand, and carries a lot of weight, long-standing. And to me, I think Sports Illustrated is number one, and then there's a couple publications that I would put in that very next tier, and Time Magazine is definitely one of those next tier publications for me.
Yep, I agree.
So, all right, Rick, very, very, very much appreciate you hopping on here. You definitely dropped some good insight, and enjoyed our discussion about the Time magazines.
Well, great having you. Great being a guest on here. I really enjoy what both you guys are doing. It's really educating folks in the hobby, and continue to share those on my Facebook page.
Yep, absolutely.
Will do.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rick.
You bet. Have a great evening, guys. Thanks.
You too. Take care.
See ya. All right. That's some good Time magazine discussion right there.
Yeah. It was great to have him on. He really was able to give us some great insight into the Time magazine.
And Rick has been one of the nicest guys throughout my journey of starting a YouTube channel and putting content out there. He has always been one of the most supportive, and just anytime I've communicated with him through social media, just super, super genuine, nice guy, and posts a lot of cool stuff that he collects. So he's definitely one of the best ones in the hobby.
Yep, that's been my experience with him as well.
All right, let's move on to topic number 2, CGC Submission Decisions. This was actually a topic on our previous episode, but we had an internet issue that kicked us off right before we got to this topic, so we carried it over to tonight. And Mike, I know this was a topic that you brought up, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you and let you lead the way on this one.
Sure. If you don't mind throwing up some visuals, we can kind of chat about it. Well, I'm putting together a group right now that I'm trying to send to CGC for grading. In fact, they're with you to get pressed, which you do a wonderful job of, by the way. I've had Jim press my magazines in the past as well, and he did a great job as well. You guys really, have been incredibly helpful as I entered into this hobby. So as I'm trying to decide on my stack of raw issues that I want to send in to get graded, I'm taking into account a handful of different things. What we're seeing here on the screen now is a spine a tear, I guess, and sometimes it's easy to pass this over. In some cases, I've had magazines where everything looks fantastic, except that we have like something like this, like a spine tear. Looks like this is like a slam magazine, so this is even modern. When you have like a thick spine, the way that it's put together, I feel like this is actually somewhat common, unfortunately. But Brad, how much would you say CGC would knock down for something like what we're seeing there with that spine tear?
Yeah, I mean this one in the photo is pretty egregious.
This is pretty good. That's a pretty good one.
I'd say at least 1 point, possibly even 2 points, maybe 1.5. I'm going to throw this out there for any listeners, maybe drop a comment. CGC actually put out a book like in the past year or two that really goes into detail about all of the defects that they look for and how much of an actual grade deduction each one is. And I've been meaning to pick up that book and I just haven't yet, and I cannot remember what it was called or where to find it. So surely someone listening to this is familiar with what I'm talking about and maybe has already picked it up. If so, please comment and let me know what the book is titled, or give me a link to where it is, because I really have been meaning to pick that up, and I want to go a little bit deeper into my understanding of just how much CGC takes off for certain issues. Because as of now, my knowledge is just based off of the magazines I've gotten back graded, and I've kind of formulated in my head somewhat of an accurate guess, but I would love to kind of see the more technical side of what CGC is actually laid out there.
Yeah, I'd love to see this book as well. I came across a video where they I guess a comic book collector was sitting down with a CGC grader, an actual grader, and he was talking the collector through the process of what he does when he sits down to grade a book, like right there. And the first thing he does is he just kind of holds it in front of him and like takes a good look at it as a whole. And he's like, off the bat, this looks like a 7, right? He just says that. And then he starts to look through, for like spine ticks, and he starts to go through the pages. First thing he did was he counted the pages. So don't forget to count the pages. That's something that I need to get better at. But he counted the pages. Then he started to look for more details like spine ticks and any other finger bends is a very common one. That's where pressing comes into play, right? Pressing can do a great job of getting a lot of finger bends out. But those sort of things then he starts to just sort of knock down the grade as he comes across more and more of these. Once you get to a certain level, I think that it seems to be like, our finger bends are kind of like cumulative or something like that, as opposed to like just like counting each individual one, making up, such and such grade. But these all come into account. The one that we're looking at here is a new or modern magazine of LeBron James, the Cleveland Rocks cover. And I see now in the top left corner, there's a little something there, but for the most part, I consider this, this was a pretty nice condition book. But when I turned it over, I saw some sort of markings near the spine. I'm not even sure what those are, to be honest, but that's not supposed to be there. So, you have to make sure that you look at the back side of the book. You should count the pages. You should look on the front, look on the back. You should check out the spine. I have some issues that look beautiful, but the spine has issues. There's sometimes you'll get like spine tears at the bottom or the top. I think, it seems to be a little bit more common on the bottom, but that happens certainly with vintage issues. There could be stainings. There could be very subtle things, dirt. And, there's things that you can do to clean them. That's a good picture to show like how bad that is. But otherwise, that seemed like a mint condition book in my hands until I saw that. And they're like, oh, that's actually not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
Another thing that I'm sorry, go ahead, Brad.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna say it's crazy how deceiving photos can be when you're buying off of eBay or buying online, because
yeah.
If you're going hunting strictly for 9.8s, be careful, because there's so many times where I'm looking at photos on eBay of a magazine. I'm like, man, this looks mint. This looks like it could be a 9.8, and then you get it in your hands and it's actually been mailed to you, and there's multiple spine ticks that you couldn't see, and possibly a couple other defects that aren't really repairable. It's just really, really hard to gauge off of photos alone until you get that in your hand. But going back to that video you mentioned, I know exactly what you're talking about. I watched that video too, and I loved that. I loved how he said the first thing that he does is he just kind of takes a overall glance at the book and just kind of gets an initial impression. And, just like, off first glance, this kind of feels like an 8.0 or something. I love that, because I know that's kind of how like SGC operates with their card grading. Whereas like PSA, or especially Beckett, may be looking more at like subgrades and kind of a more technical version of it. SGC, yeah, SGC, if I'm not mistaken, they've never actually gone to the subgrades, and people have begged them to. And I heard their CEO telling one time why, and it's because he just feels like sometimes it shouldn't be so technical about the subgrades of, oh, this is the corners, this is the centering, this is the surface. Sometimes it's just more important, hey, what's the overall appeal of this card, or
Which
what's
is
the overall
why,
look?
absolutely, which is why sometimes you'll find a PSA 2 that looks near mint, and
Exactly.
sometimes you'll have like a PSA like 7 that has like messed up corners or a crease or something.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I like SGC's approach to that so much better. And I really like that same approach with magazines as well. I can't help but wonder when I, saw that video, and he's showing his process of actually going through and what he's looking at and counting the pages. I can't help but wonder if that's the exact same process we're getting from these people that are grading our Sports Illustrateds, because it's obvious how much CGC specializes in comics, and how, I mean, to me, it just feels like the grading of comics is so much more detailed and thorough, whereas the grading of the Sports Illustrated just sometimes seems like a crapshoot. It's like you
Yeah.
never know what you're going to get. I think that's largely just because they may not have as many experienced employees with the sports magazine side of things. So I just can't help but wonder if that process truly is identical with the comics, or if there's a little bit of differentiation when they're grading our Sports Illustrateds.
Yeah, hopefully some of the people over there are starting to get to the point now where they feel like they're kind of becoming experts with some of these magazines.
Yeah.
But they've kind of been doing this long enough where somebody over there should be an expert.
I agree.
We keep making excuses. They're a comic book company, like, yeah, but they've been doing this for a while too, and they take some good money to slab these.
I mean, yeah, I mean they started grading sports magazines in '09.
Yeah.
I
I'd
mean,
be an expert by now if I was doing anything from '09.
I mean, it hasn't really boomed in popularity until the past couple of years, but still, I agree
Sure.
with you.
Yeah.
I would hope by now they've kind of got it down to more of a science.
I would hope so too. This is kind of a picture showing really advanced and worst case scenarios of spine issues. However, if you're into buying, or if you're into getting vintage like sport magazine, which I love, and here there's a bunch of those issues in this picture, it is notorious for having some of the outer paper of the spine has been ripped away or deteriorated, and you can actually see the inner pages there. It's very common. And the thing about a lot of these listings on eBay, for instance, of these magazines is there's a lot of people that sell magazines that aren't collectors, that aren't in the hobby, that don't know that some of these things are even collectible at all. They just have these magazines and they don't know to show details. They just might have like a cover or something like that. Whenever I'm getting a vintage magazine, or really any magazine, but certainly vintage and certainly sport magazine, I always ask about the spine. And if I could see a picture, better yet, because I can't tell you how common it is for people to list these magazines and they have no information about the spine or even the back sometimes.
Anytime I'm examining a magazine and maybe like making a projection on what grade I think it could get, first place I'm looking is the spine. I'm looking up and down that spine for spine ticks, especially spine ticks that break color. I'm checking the staples to see if the staples are still, thoroughly attached, or if there's been a staple tear. I'm looking for little seam splits on the spine. Those are some of the most common, and I feel like, biggest defects that CGC is looking at when they're grading.
Yeah. Can I ask you this, Brad? When you're pressing, you've pressed these vintage magazines before as well, right? And I know not as many, but you probably have.
Oh yeah.
Is it a similar process, different process? I know that a lot of the sport magazines have like the staples, two pretty prominent staples that come through like like right up to the edge of the cover of the front. How does that handled?
Yeah, the process is definitely going to vary a little bit for the vintage, and especially, like a sport magazine, where, it's almost like there's a glued, like a glued spine or a glued cover, but there's also staples on the interior, as opposed to the Sports Illustrateds that are just staples. So yeah, there's definitely some variations in how you're using your backer boards and your whatever 65-pound paper, your different layers and stacks that you're putting them in, you have to make some adjustments based on what's in the magazine. You also got to be looking at advertisements, like the little subscription cards that are in there. You have to take into consideration the size of the magazine, because a lot of the vintage Sports Illustrateds are taller. And so like some of the basic size, like backer boards or paper that I would use on pressing a modern magazine, they're too small to put inside as a layer for a vintage magazine, because then it's going to cause an imprint. So yeah, there's definitely some nuances that you have to be aware of based on the age of the publication, based on the type of publication and the type of spine they're using, and all those different things. It takes a lot of practice too. And I definitely I encourage anyone to try and to teach themselves pressing. I don't think it's all that difficult. But of course, it depends on how often you're going to do it. I'm sitting here and I send in probably one box to CGC every 2 or 3 weeks. So I'm constantly doing it. And, if you're just a very casual collector, then sure, it makes sense to not waste your time and mess around with it. But if you're going to be sending in boxes regularly, I think it's worth the time to learn and practice. But you do want to start off, doing some more junk or low value magazines before you put something in there of potential value. You want to kind of get the process down a little bit. So
something else I wanted to mention before we move on from this topic, the topic being, what submission decisions, like which magazines that one would choose to send. All these things come in play for sure, but just as important, and I know a lot of us actually are collectors, including myself, but resale value. So if I have a magazine, even if it's in mint condition, sometimes doesn't necessarily mean that it should be graded, unless I truly just want it to be a part of my personal collection, which can be the case. But in general, you have to take into account, if you're somebody like myself, I have somebody like you that is pressing magazines for me, and that costs some money, and submitting itself costs money. For vintage, it costs like $37, I believe, and for modern, it's $25, I think. So, basically, when I'm looking at an issue, I'm thinking to myself, like a raw issue, okay, here's a find. I have to add $50 to that price, and is it still worth it at that point?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a question that people need to ask themselves for any issue that they're going to send into CGC. Like you said, if it's a PC item and it's like, hey, this is something that is important to me or has meaning to me and I want to keep, then slab it. It doesn't matter. But if you're thinking in terms of, I may resell this at some point, then yeah, you got to find what's that break-even point. And like you said, you got to take into account shipping. You got to take into account pressing. You got to take into account, obviously, the cost of buying the magazine, and then as well as the submission fee with CGC. So all those factors come into play. You come up with your number, and then basically, let's say the number that you get to is $60. Like, hey, okay, this magazine would cost me $60 all in. Well, once it gets graded, would you be able to resell it for $60? And that's hard to answer, but you need to, that's where a little bit of self-projecting as far as the potential grade can be really helpful. And, a way to do that is watch some of the videos, watch some of the reveal videos I put out, watch some of the unboxing videos Jim puts out, look at images online of slabs that have already been graded, and observe what the grade is, take a look at the pictures and the flaws you can see, read the grader's notes. Those are some ways to educate yourself where you can at least reasonably do some self-projecting, because you want to know, is it going to be worth it for me to send in? And that's largely going to come down to not just the condition obviously plays a factor, but what's the cover of, who's on the cover, not every cover, like you said. I mean, to be truthful, the majority of the Sports Illustrated covers don't carry a lot of value, but you got to know what the key covers are, and the first covers of Hall of Famers, and just whatever other reason that a cover might be collectible. But a lot of factors that come into play when determining if it is actually worth it to send your magazine in and come up with those submission decisions.
Yep. Agreed.
All right. Let me slide this one off and let's go back to our previous. So we're gonna move into topic number 3. Raw newsstand prices. So this was something that I wanted to mention, and this mainly popped in my head because there's a handful of magazines that I was watching on eBay a week or two ago, and I was really struck by the final price that they sold for, because these were magazines that I was interested in. I thought, oh, maybe, I can get a good deal on these. And the final sale price was just like, whoa, that was up there. I did not expect that. So it seems like newsstand prices continue, and I'm talking raw, ungraded magazines. It seems like the newsstand prices keep going up. And that's because, as we know, the newsstands are really hard to find, majorly more rare compared to the subscriptions. But I'm going to read off a couple examples here of, these were some newsstand issues that I was kind of taking a look at the other day, and the final prices. A 1967 Carl Yastrzemski first cover newsstand, beautiful cover, by the way. And I think here's the kicker: is it appeared to be in excellent condition, but this thing sold for, look at this, $762.
Wow.
For a raw newsstand copy that has not even been graded. Now, once again, photos can be really deceiving. Now, if you're just glancing at this, yeah, this thing looks clean. I mean, you're looking at, wow, this might even have a shot at 9.0. Of course, we want to take a look at the back as well to get a better idea. But man, that price really struck me. Another one was this Oscar Robertson. I don't know if you were watching this one too, Mike. An Oscar Robertson first cover went for $562.
Yep.
It's like, have you, and then, okay, have you observed this, Mike, with the newsstands and the pricing? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Actually, just right before we jumped on, Hulk Hogan first cover sold for a modest $152, which is modest compared to those prices. I also seen some sellers that seem to be trying a new route of selling some of their newsstand issues, not even bothering going through the process of grading and making them available straight up as newsstands, but with hefty price tags already right off the bat. So I definitely noticed this. I think some of those ones that have like the buy it nows with the big price tags are moving slower, but the newsstands, I guess they're so few and far between that when a nice one seems to become available, people will flock to it. And the thing is that, like you said, images can be deceiving. Also, you still take a chance that it's not a newsstand. In some cases, it looks very apparent that it is a newsstand. You take your educated guess. A lot of these collectors have been in the hobby for a while now and know what they're doing and what they're looking at. And, probably, if they're smart, reach out to the seller for more details. But you are technically still taking a chance.
Very, very good point. Yeah. You are not always 100. You can't really be 100% certain that it is actually a newsstand. I've had multiple times where I purchase a magazine, I'm really excited about it, and then it gets in my hands and I realize it had a freaking label removed. But one thing is, eBay is pretty good about maybe even too good sometimes, siding with the buyer. But if you buy a magazine and it said newsstand, and then you get it in your hands and it wasn't, eBay will 100% give you a refund on that. So you can at least have some peace of mind. If a title or a description says newsstand and it comes back not truly a newsstand, you can get your money back on that. So go out guns a-blazing and have some confidence. Little trickier if they don't specify it, but like you said, Mike, I always message the seller and just specifically ask, did this copy have a label removed on the front cover?
There's a good number of sellers who try to play, again, coy in their listing, but once they're asked, they'll either just say, yeah, it used to have a label, or let me check. Oh yeah, now I see something, So that sort of thing does happen. I'm curious about those two issues that you just brought up, the Carly Strimsky first cover and the Oscar Robertson first cover. Do we have any comps on actual sales data for graded issues? Is that even worth it in a high grade? I would imagine it is.
I would think both of those in high grade would definitely be worth it. But yeah, let me check that real quick I'll see if I can find anything. And while I'm doing that, another thing that I think is really helpful to do if you come across an issue that's for sale and you're not 100% sure that it's a newsstand and you're trying to investigate, I love to look at the seller's other items for sale and look at the way that they're labeling and notating. So if they're selling others, if they have other Sports Illustrated magazines up for sale, you can sometimes take some hints and some clues from how they label them. Because let's say, for example, that someone has an issue listed and it says no label. Well, some people put no label and that truly is a newsstand. Some people put no label because it had a label removed, and yeah, it doesn't have a label anymore.
Right.
And so if you click on the seller's other items and that one issue you're looking at says no label, and then you start scrolling through his other magazines and you see, oh, wait, why is he describing these other ones as newsstands? That's a pretty good indication that no label you're looking at probably had a label removed. Because if this person actually knows what a newsstand is and he's labeling others as a newsstand, he would have labeled this one as a newsstand too. So sometimes I take some hints or some clues. It's not a perfect science, but I think it can be helpful to look at what else they're selling.
Yep. Yeah, I do the same thing. I also think that, no labels become like a little tagline that people are putting in there to try to attract some traffic. I wonder if they think that people like, I wonder if there's like sort of like a psychological game going on to a degree where people like to find like the little treasures. I know I do. I like to find like, oh, this person doesn't even realize what they have type of thing. This is a hidden treasure, like going into like a pawn shop and finding like, something incredible. So I wonder if sometimes sellers will try to play off like, oh, this is just a magazine, but I'm going to make it obvious that, there's no label. Maybe, a buyer will think, oh, this is like a good opportunity.
Yeah. So the Oscar Robertson first cover, an 8.0 newsstand sold exactly 2 years ago for $250. That's very low. I mean, like I just said, that
It's less than the raw copy that we just saw.
The raw copy went for over 500. Now,
Right.
as I said, that was 2 years ago. I feel fairly confident that if that Oscar Robertson first cover 8.0 hit today, I sure would hope it would go for more than 250. I think there's a pretty strong chance it would. Yastrzemski, the only comp I'm seeing that has been graded was a 6.5 that sold this past April for 154. So who knows what a high grade copy would go for. But I think you made another good point that it doesn't seem like the buy it nows are moved very well. Most of the buy it nows are priced higher. I mean, I'll even admit, I've only got a handful of slabs up for sale on my eBay store, maybe 10 or 15, and most of them I've got set with just a buy it now price. And don't get a lot of action on those. You might get one offer, here and there every once in a while, but for the most part, they just sit. And that's what I see with a lot of them that are up for sale. It, it's kind of risky sometimes, but man, I've seen some really, really good action and some really good results when you just let that baby ride starting off at 99 cents in an auction.
Yeah, absolutely.
It seems like it gets more initial eyes on it, and it's almost like it builds momentum. It's like
Yes.
the number of watchers start building, and then the bids start rolling in, and
And
it's
also people get invested. They're watching this thing for a week.
yeah.
Like by the time the week's up, it's every one of these people watching it, like it's already a part of their collection.
Yeah. It's just so tough because the other side of that coin is, you also see some where it's just like, dang,
Yes.
that thing only sold for $30 or, whatever. So
Yeah, that's a risky take.
it's tricky, but
The prices that you just quoted from 2 years ago, I feel like 2 years ago was like probably right before there was a kind of like a spike in graded magazines, right? I would say a year ago there was a seemingly a spike,
yeah,
and things have come down, but they're, I think, still higher than they were 2 years ago.
I agree for sure. Yep. I think that spike was about a year ago, maybe even a year and a half ago, but it really seems like the past 12 months that it's picked up pretty substantially. Last August of 2022 was when there was a round of really strong sales on Heritage in the same month. I know there was a Mantle first cover. I think there was an Ali first cover. There was like a 9.8 LeBron first cover, a 9.8 Kobe first cover, all those in the same month. It feels to me like right around that time is whenever interest started to really see a bigger incline.
And I think that there's more and more people that are being turned, are made aware of this and are getting interested in this hobby. But collectibles in general are just at a low still
Yeah,
now for a bunch of different reasons.
yeah, they are. But I think that every day you're getting card collectors who are stumbling across something on YouTube or
Mhm.
or social media because the algorithms within those social media sites recognize the potential interest there and how it's similar to what these people already look at, and they're kind of falling in gaining a little bit interest in the graded magazines for the first time because they're just they're seeing it pop up on their feeds and as recommended things, and they're like, wow, this looks kind of cool. And how much they jump in, who knows, but it is kind of exciting to see more and more people just kind of be more aware of it and show some interest in it.
Yeah, and some of these newsstand prices might suggest that there's a lot of people that are jumping in for the hunting and gathering part of the whole hobby.
The hunting part is that's one of the most fun components of this.
Yeah,
And there's
it
still there's still
really is.
plenty to be hunted. Okay. Um, Mike, you want to roll into our show and tell?
Yeah,
All right. I will let you start. Um, let's see. I do have your images, don't I? Let me get those pulled up real quick. I think it's on my other slide.
yeah. I think I have three different groups I wanted to share.
Oh, shoot, let me pull up this other one real quick. There we go. That's the one I want. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Gotcha.
So I wanted to share some Sports Illustrated China magazines that I've gotten slabbed recently, as well as some new raw ones that I'm submitting shortly. So these are a couple. I'm a LeBron collector, so these are a couple of LeBron Sports Illustrated China issues, and I thought it was just so interesting that these are independent from the covers that were done here in the States. In some cases, they mimic the state's covers, and in other cases they just go their own direction completely. And in some cases, like the covers are like really cool and dramatic. So the one on the left, I just thought was just a great, as a LeBron collector, that's just a great LeBron, cover right there with a dramatic lighting behind him and the Chinese writing in front of him.
And it's one that was not on a US cover, correct?
No, absolutely not. And the one on the right as well was not a US cover.
Oh,
But
okay.
what a great shot. I just love it. And got Barack Obama in the corner there with the "Yes, we can." That was in 2008. I guess this was around election time. And we were talking about, is this maybe one of his first Sports Illustrated cover appearances? I'm not sure.
You got a Barack Obama first cover right there.
Yeah, right there. Oh yeah,
I think that definitely adds a pretty interesting and potentially collectible touch to that one. But I'm in total agreement with you. I love the SI Chinas. I think they are so cool. They have some amazingly cool covers, and for whatever reason, the Chinese or Mandarin, whatever, writing, like the characters just look cool. I mean, heck, that's what you see like a lot of the basketball players get those tattooed. It just looks cooler than the English letters. And yeah, you get some different photos that are not on the US covers. I'm a big fan of the SI Chinas.
I think a lot of people have dealt with the SI Chinas will agree that getting high grades is a little bit trickier. The paper stock is a little bit different, and once you get finger bends in there, they're harder to get out apparently than the US covers.
Yeah, definitely true. The covers are like ultra glossy, like just super glossy, and not only are they harder to press out the defects, but it just seems like they're more easily damaged. And part of that may be because these were at some point shipped from China all the way to us, and who knows what kind of trip they went through. But yeah, pretty tough to get these SI Chinas in a high grade.
I felt good about these 8.0s. Should I continue on with these, or do you want to go back and forth?
Go for it. I'll let you, because you've kind of got a trend. So
Sure. So here's an example where they mimicked the US cover from this. I believe it's the same month. And I got, these are like my twins here. They got the same grade, the same cool shot. Even the US version is actually very low pop. I think it's a pop 3, 4, somewhere around there. And this is one of the highest grades. Not sure if it's the highest. It might be the second highest. And then the Sports Illustrated China version, I think it might be the only one that's been graded, period. So yeah, I love that I have one of each of these guys. And there's some subtle differences. But beyond like the stock, we've talked about how sometimes the actual title, Sports Illustrated title, could be changed. And here it's in red in Sports Illustrated China, but in the US version it's in white. And a couple other small variations. You have that NHL playoffs thing on the right side on the US version, but not the Chinese version.
Mike, do you ever use an app such as Google Translate to look at what the wording actually says?
A smart person would do that. That's a great idea.
Because
It's a great idea, but yeah, it's certainly like to like figure out, like even to figure out like what the date is. I look in the barcode there, and I can pretty much put it together. But yeah, it would be great to like see, does it say LeBron arrives? I'm assuming so.
it says, so my translation, because I do this a lot with the Chinese magazines that I'm looking at. I use Google Lens is the app that I use, and you basically take a picture and there's a translate button, and it will just like translate words in a different language. So what my translation I'm getting here is that the big headline where it would say LeBron arrives, it says spur horse.
Oh,
And it says
well, naturally.
Cavaliers, and then underneath it says Cavaliers versus Spurs, talking about offense NBA Finals.
Right. This was during his first finals appearance, I guess,
And then
against the Spurs.
like up in the top left, where in the American one it says Bill France Jr., it says, and my picture kind of cut off, but it says Yao Ming run fast. So there's sometimes a little bit lost in translation with these, but I've always found it very interesting to, get a general idea of what some of these covers actually say.
Wow, yes. Wow. That's very interesting. And my last one here, when I was visiting the Sports Illustrated cover site that you shared with us a couple episodes back, um, I was looking through the Sports Illustrated Chinas, and I came across these two covers, and I fell in love with them immediately. And I told myself if they ever became available, I was grabbing those. I wanted these in my PC, and sure enough, they did. Through a seller that you and I both are familiar with, that comes across a lot of these Sports Illustrated Chinas, and I think these are just gorgeous, and they look great as a pair. There was two other issues, I think a Rajon Rondo, and then a fourth. I forget who it was, but I was interested in the other two. There's a couple differences in these two magazines. The first obvious one is the barcode is missing on the LeBron on the front, and I think on the back there's another athlete on the LeBron, but not the Kobe. I might be mistaken there, but I think that's the case. Also, the paper cover the cover stock is slightly different. I believe the Kobe was slightly more glossy, so I'm not sure what the difference is here. Maybe something different in distribution. I don't know.
That's interesting. Yeah, I love these covers as well. They remind me of some covers that Sports Illustrated did like in the early to mid 2000s. I want to say like 03, 04, 05, somewhere in that range. Every year during March Madness time, they would have one cover right before the NCAA basketball tournament started, where they had one different like athlete or one different representative from all 65 schools that had made the tournament, and it had this exact same kind of look. So that's what these remind me of.
Yeah, I'm sure that they had that in mind when they put this together, but they went through a lot of effort to like piece this all together. This is also kind of a fun snapshot of 2011, basketball. You have like pretty much anybody and a lot of all sorts of notable players in the background there.
Yeah, and
Coaches.
also, I mean, 2011, that was kind of around the time where the debate was still really big on who's the best player in the NBA, Kobe or LeBron. And
True.
2011 was probably getting closer to the point where LeBron was dominating that discussion more. But there was a several year window there, probably from like '08 to 11, something like that, where that was really the big thing, like who's the best player, Kobe or LeBron. And it's a shame that they never faced against each other in the NBA finals, because that would have been pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
that would have been great.
All right. Let's see. I don't even remember what I grabbed for my show and tell. Oh yeah. I know I sat two out here. So this is one I haven't graded yet. And this just kind of goes towards the whole idea of just cool looking covers. This is not one that's necessarily collectible as far as athlete goes, but this is Bill Freehand from the Tigers. I don't think Bill Freehand is in the Hall of Fame, but he was I want to say he was like an 8-time All-Star. I didn't look it up beforehand, but I know he was a very good player in his day, in the 60s and 70s. I actually think that two of my favorite athletes, Adam Wainwright and Yadier Molina, they broke the record last year for most starts together as a pair, as a battery, a pitcher catcher combo. I'm pretty sure the record they broke belonged to Bill Freehand and Mickey Lolich from the Tigers. But I picked this up because it was a newsstand, and I just think this is such a beautiful cover with the different colors. And so even though I have zero really connection or passion for Bill Freehand as an athlete, I think I'm going to send this one in to get graded just because I love the aesthetic so much.
That's very cool and very 1969.
Very 1969. And then the other one that I pulled out was, we were talking about Time Magazine and talking about some non-Sports Illustrated publications. I mentioned how, to me, Time Magazine is really in that next tier. We'll one of the other biggest ones in that next tier for me is Slam magazine. Well, you can see over my shoulder, I've got a Kobe Bryant Slam magazine up there, but this is one of my best Slams that I own. And even though I'm not a huge LeBron guy, this is his first Slam cover. Also got Sebastian Telfair on there. Graded 9.4. This is one of the 2 highest graded copies of LeBron James' first Slam cover, and CGC did notate first LeBron James Slam cover. And so once again, even though I'm not a huge LeBron guy, I think there's some I think Slams are underrated, kind of like Rick was saying about time, and pretty cool to have the highest graded LeBron first Slam cover.
Yeah, very cool. Just kind of struck me real fast, a little disrespectful that they don't even mention Telfar in the title at all.
They did. I just didn't read
it.
Oh,
they. Oh, okay.
It does say first LeBron and Sebastian Telfair.
Oh, good.
My apologies, Sebastian, if you're watching this. So,
very cool. That's great.
That's all I got. So, Mike, you got anything you want to wrap us up with?
No. Again, as always, love chatting mags with you.
Absolutely. Appreciate everybody tuning in and watching. We didn't go live this time. We had, there's just a lot more margin for error with when we do the live stream, and we didn't feel like we were quite prepared to do that this evening, but we will be bringing back the live streams. So keep an eye out for that, and we definitely hope to have you join in. But in the meantime, thank you so much for listening and watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Drop some comments in, throw some questions at us. Maybe if you got some topic suggestions, we'd love to take those and put those in for our next episode. But until then, thank you all so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Take care.